Sheffield Town Hall. Thank you all for attending the October meeting of our cooperative executive. Today's meeting is open to the public, and although there is a reduced room capacity to ensure we are a COVID-secure environment and that social distancing is properly observed. The meeting will be webcast live, and the recording will also be available for people to view through the Council's website. As a result of the reduced room capacity, we have one member of the public who will be asking the question, and report authors who are presenting items today that are observing the meeting on the screening reception room. They will be invited into the council chamber for their individual items. This may mean that there will be a short pause between these items to allow them to make their way into the room. I therefore ask for your patience to allow this to be managed in a safe and secure way. Please can I ask and request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff in the room. The assembly point is Tudor Square. So before we start the meeting, it would be great if each cooperative executive member could introduce themselves in turn, and we'll start at the top with Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Turpin, Executive Member for Inclusive Economy, Jobs and Skills.
Yes, Councillor Douglas Johnson, Executive Member for Climate Change, Environment and Transport.
Thank you, Chair. Alison Teal, Executive Member for Sustainable Neighbourhoods, Wellbeing, Parks and Leisure.
Kate.
Councillor Kate MacDonald, and I'm Executive Member for Finance and Resources.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor George Mills-Hammond. I'm Executive Member for Health and Social Care.
Okay, sorry. Jane Dunn, Children, Families and Young People. And Education, sorry.
Thank you. Can I also ask that officers who are in the room, if they can introduce themselves, and we'll go across, up and down.
Gillian Duckworth, Director of Legal and Governance.
Abby Brownsword, Principal Committee Secretary.
Eugene Walker, Executive Director Resources. Apologies.
Thank you, everyone. Can members please note that there is a change to the items on the agenda as published. Item 11 we are now going to take before item 8 to accommodate the pressures on one of the officers who is attending. So we will be dealing with item 11 before item 8, just for information. At item 2, in relation to apologies for absence, I have apologies from Councillor Terry Fox, Councillor Paul Wood and Councillor Mazza Iqbal. At item 3, there are no items on the agenda where we need to exclude the press or the public. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Can I ask whether any members have any items they wish to declare, and if so, can you please refer to the item of business and whether it's the pecuniary or personal interest that you are declaring, please. Councillor Dunn.
Just to say that item 11 is actually in my ward.
Thank you. Item 5 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 22nd of September. Can we approve those minutes as a correct record, please? All happy? Thank you. And item 6 is public questions and petitions. We have with us Nigel Slack, who's got, I think, 3 questions today, Nigel. You're very welcome. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Yes, 2 questions, but 2 parts in one. So, kicking off with question 1. Today's agenda includes 2 items covering what might be referred to as the city's land utilisation and asset performance. Item 9 about the Sheffield plan, and item 10 about the Sheffield Land and Property Plan. In respect of item 9, I would simply ask whether, with a UDP from the previous century and a core strategy that is 12 years old, how will the city moderate the rapacious nature of property developers from damaging the city's heritage and exploiting local planning guideline weaknesses? And then, in respect of item 10, I would ask a slightly more complex question. The city's property services have performed poorly over the last 5 or more years in disposing of heritage assets in particular. Mount Pleasant House took 3 years to complete a sale. There was confusion and obfuscation over the fate of Burley Spa. There was deceit and dissembling around the development of the General Cemetery. And there are ongoing concerns over the redevelopment of Cambridge Street. This report does nothing to assuage many of those issues previously identified. The main point for me, however, is that these disposal choices were made by property services with little or no consultation with Sheffield heritage groups or residents in the city. Are these assets held in trust for the residents of the city, or are they being treated as the personal assets of Property Services Department? The report today gives no confidence that future disposals will be any better handled than previous bodge jobs. Will Council therefore consider this report in view of the changing nature of decision-making in the city and this committee's commitment to inclusive decision-making and the involvement of residents in decisions? If so, this report needs further review. And I would just comment that £33 million of outstanding repairs is a dire and immediate problem. And I would be happy to meet with the relevant executive member to discuss that in more detail. And question 2, Orchard Lane. For those uncertain, Orchard Lane runs from Leopold Street towards Barham Green, alongside Leopold Square. It allows for rear access to the tenants of Leopold Square and to the car park beneath the Fountain Precinct. Currently, the land on this lane within the curtilage of Leopold Street is a literal tip. Broken window frames, broken furniture, dumped beer barrels, full plastic rubbish bags, and general detritus, some of which also appears to be blocking fire exits from Leopold Square properties. I recognise that the hospitality trade is under pressure after the problems of lockdowns and staff shortages, but having seen the state of this lane, I will not be visiting any of the businesses with such lax hygiene on display. What can Sheffield City Council do to support and or enforce reasonable levels of cleanliness? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. In relation to the first question that you asked in respect of item 9 and the UDP and the core strategies, that's one for me to deal with. So I think it's important to just make you understand that the Council is able to use the National Planning Policy Framework to guide planning decisions where local plan policies are out of date. We can do that. However, a number of policies in the core strategy and the saved policies that we have that are in the UDP are consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework, and so these can be given significant weight when making decisions on planning applications. So we are quite confident and happy that we are okay to deal with those things. In respect of item 10, I'm going to hand over to Councillor MacDonald to respond to that particular.
Thank you for your question, Mr Slack. I will answer the part that's relevant to my portfolio, but I have to say I find the tone of it quite upsetting, and I think we all have to take responsibility for the tone of our language in the public domain, but I will provide an answer. The plan that we've got on the agenda today provides a high-level overview of what the Council will use its estate for and the principles for decision-making. It will be underpinned by a more detailed suite of policies and procedures which will set out how decisions will be made about the Council's estate, including disposal of Council assets, alongside other issues of estate management. As a Council, we are committed to inclusive decision-making and will be exploring local area committees, how best local people can input into the decision the Council makes about our estate. For the record, let me be absolutely clear. Decisions about the Council's land and property are not made by property services, but are made corporately through the appropriate governance arrangements as set out in the Leader's Scheme of Delegation. All decisions about disposals are undertaken in line with the Council's current disposal policy. None of the assets mentioned in your question are held in trust. Any assets which are held in trust are brought to Cooperative Executive for decisions, with members of the Cooperative Executive acting as trustees. Thank you again for your question.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. And in relation to Orchard Lane, this falls into Councillor Wood's portfolio. Unfortunately, he's unable to be with us today, so I have a response that I will read out if that's okay on his behalf. The response says that a number of issues that have been highlighted in the question for this lane are already being looked into, so thank you for drawing them to our attention. Any fly tipping will be removed, and we will contact businesses where they are believed to be disposing of waste illegally. Commercial bins on pavements is an issue on some streets in the surrounding area, and our highways enforcement team are already working on this and a number of issues in the local area, and will consider what further action needs to be taken in relation to the issues that you have raised, and we'll be happy to confirm the actions taken once they've been completed. So thank you for attending today, Mr. Slack. It's good to see you as always. Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is items called in for scrutiny. I haven't been notified of any, so that's moving swiftly on then to what is now item 11 on the agenda, which we've agreed to take earlier, which is in relation to the procurement for the care and support services of the new Buchanan Green Retirement Living Scheme due to open in spring 2022, which members will find on pages 73 to 82 of their agenda, and we'll just wait for officers to come in to be brought into the room. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you both for coming. Just for the record, we have Paul Higginbottom and Alexis Chappell who will be presenting the paper for us this afternoon. You're very welcome. Thank you for attending today.
So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today regarding the report. So I'm just going to introduce the report, and then I'm going to hand over to Paul for some more background. So this is an exciting opportunity as a partnership between colleagues in housing, health and social care to develop a retirement living scheme for older people in the city. And the purpose of the paper today is to seek approval for procurement for care and support services at the development. And I'm going to hand over to Paul. So thank you very much.
Okay, so the Buchanan Green Retirement Living Scheme is a new independent scheme, and it will be opening in spring 2022. It comprises of 140 homes, 18 bungalows with 122 apartments. The purpose for today, as Alexis said, is very much around the care and support from us, led by adult social care, and there'll be 50% of those 122 apartments for non-care tenants, and the remainder will be in receipt of assessed health and social care services. The actual scheme will consist of state-of-the-art facilities. There'll be communal areas, there'll be cafe facilities with various community hubs, and they will be environmentally friendly. So colleagues from Housing and Neighbourhoods have invested in electric charging for vehicles, and they've got ambitious plans for a recycling scheme for tenants. The care and support services, the planned care, will be delivered from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and there'll be 24/7 unplanned care on the site available too. The contract we're proposing will be 5 years. We have been working closely in the initial service design with colleagues from health and primary care. GP surgeries will be delivered on site through dedicated resources. We'll be working closely with housing staff on housing related support, but we're also introducing public health colleagues into the collaboration, where the service will be very preventative. So on site there'll be various clinics, there'll be breathe easy classes, there'll be exercise classes in falls prevention, and we're also been pioneering some new what we call tech-enabled care. So we've been doing some work with a project called the Magic Table that's been tested in one of the extra care facilities, and it's been a real success. So we're already earmarking the deployment of this type of technology actually in the venue itself. We are going to be focusing very heavily on dementia care. We see that as a big challenge in these schemes, and it's really integrating people with and without dementia into that single community. To that effect, we've had an expert by experience who we've been working with who actually has an Alzheimer's diagnosis, and he's been looking at some of the design principles for the actual building to make sure they are dementia friendly. Care at night will be planned care through the night where people have got an assessed need, so the care at night service will actually reach into the facilities as it does now in extra care. Buchanan Green is a hybrid of sheltered housing and extra care. So it is relatively unique in that regard. It isn't a traditional extra care scheme. So we have the non-care tenants is 50%, where typically it would be 30% non-care tenants if we were in other schemes. The scheme, as I said, will be opening in spring 2022. In terms of the contribution of the scheme, customer satisfaction is absolutely at the heart. We want a strong voice for the customer throughout that service provision to support the contract. We've also planned transformational developments where we're looking to reduce health inequalities, and we'll also be looking at developing an outcome-based service delivery model, moving away from time and task, which already is some of our plans in home care service provision. In terms of the equality impact assessment, we're really keen to make sure that the facility reflects the immediate community. We know we've got some challenges in extra care where we're predominantly white male and female. We really want to make sure that the offer is as inclusive as possible. So we will be doing some work, or are doing some work in that area. The actual cost of the 5-year contract is estimated at £4.4 million for the duration of the 5-year term. And that breaks down to roughly £884,000 per year. And that concludes the overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Linda Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief comment, and thank you, Alexis and Paul, for coming to present today. This is a really exciting scheme, in my opinion, because it is, for me, one of the starts of a really fundamental shift we have to make as a city council, but for our citizens, towards what I would describe as a more mixed model of the way that older people, particularly in this case, but anyone that needs additional support that can't easily be provided in your existing home is provided. There's absolutely an ongoing role for what we would see as more traditional care and nursing home models, but enabling people to live in places which are really absolutely built to be accessible, and needing that additional support is not contingent on you living there. And I think that high percentage of people living independently in this scheme is really important. Let us look towards communities in Sheffield which are genuinely resilient against the effects of ill health, which is the only way we really can build going forward, because we'll be hearing lots today about the difficulties that this council in the city are going to have in future years with budgets in terms of looking after people in social care. And we have to look at how can we enable people to keep independent, but not forcing people to stay independent, providing fantastic quality spaces to do so. So I really commend this scheme. I look forward to visiting when it's open. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn?
Yeah, thank you. I'm getting there first though, Councillor Linders-Hammond, but we maybe can do a joint visit. Really proud that actually this has been a journey that we've been on since I had the lead in housing, and this was this little seed was started, and then the development, and I can't believe, and I'm just so excited, and it's just what the people of our city need. And I will say, especially in my ward, because a lot of them do have to move out from the community they love, because there isn't the suitable accommodation there, and they desperately miss that infrastructure. And I think the fact it is so forward-thinking, it is so much investment is going into a part of the city which needs it most desperately. But I just think it's unbelievable, and I'm so proud. But George said everything else, and somebody that does an awful lot of work with dementia people there, I know, who will have been bending George's ear about that quite a lot in the right way. And it just shows what can happen when we all pull together. And I think it has been a lot of hard work over a number of years, and despite a pandemic, it's still going to happen. And I can't wait, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. I've got Councillor Turpin, then Councillor Johnson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, it looks really good, or it sounds really good. Just a small question that, bearing in mind that half of the residents don't have any care needs, and I wondered if it will raise any revenue for the council, or if the 4.4 million is like a net cost, or how does that work out, or is that even possible?
I think the 4.4 million is actually, for the care and support, but that will include 24/7 unplanned care. So the idea is it's a kind of a home for life, and if people would have health episode, they would get that care whether they were in receipt of assessed care or not. So it is about that journey.
Just to add to that, I think it's a really good question, because I think what we've got here is a really innovative development, and we're at the start of this really innovative development. So we have the specific care and support needs to the individuals who need the care and support there. But equally, what we've got an opportunity by working in partnership with health colleagues, public health colleagues and wider VCF is to look at what the wider economic opportunities that you're talking about that could be built upon the development. So I think I would certainly welcome the opportunities out with us to discuss any opportunities you can think about. So, good.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say it's obviously a good scheme. It's actually really encouraging to see the scheme coming forward. That is both for mix, and it's really good for equalities, that mixing people who are older and who are disabled with those who are not, or don't class themselves as such, or at least don't receive social care, which is a different thing. Also good to see some development in that area, which has needed it for years. So that's excellent. I just wonder if you can just clarify in terms of the 5-year contract. I'm assuming that the 5-year contract is for provision of care, and that's separate from the provision of the buildings, which will be council tenancies, won't they? Yeah, so nodding, so that's great. And on the climate change issues, which of course we always have to ask about, you did refer to it, Paul, that's good. It's not in the report. I'm sure that it will be built to good standards because the whole point is to protect people who are older or disabled, and so it better had be well-insulated buildings there. But I just wondered if that could be addressed at some point. We're trying to move to a situation where these reports should have a climate change impact assessment alongside the other sets of implications like your finance and equalities. It's not in there yet, we're in a transition stage, but it'd be interesting to see more about that when it comes along. But I was just thinking probably the easiest way is you'll be bringing forward a planning application presumably, won't you?
I think the ground's been broken, so I think if the build is underway already.
Yes, okay. Has it gone through? If so, I've missed it, you see. Okay. I wonder if, in that case, if I could ask you if you just follow up with any assessment of the build structure in terms of climate change impact at a later date. That would be really useful.
Can I bring Councillor Linders Hammond in? He may be able to help.
I'm happy to clarify. So all the information, I'm not saying mess on it in the form, you're absolutely right when the climate change assessment things, to this place or through another decision, the document laying out all the planning and the build for it came through a formal decision route, which we can find. I think it would have been wise, actually, even though this is the care and support today, maybe to bring along someone from the housing side who did that planning. I can't see offhand exactly the standard to which the building be built to, but absolutely that sort of stuff was covered in the previous report that was some time ago now. So I think the thing to do will perhaps for us to uncover that old report and we can look at that so we can find out those details if that's suitable.
Absolutely fine by me, yes. I just wanted to check it's been covered. I'm sure it will be, absolutely no qualms about it, but I'm just saying it'd be good to flag that up. If you've got something to give me the background detail, then that would be, I'd really appreciate that. No need to do any extra work to go out of the way, though. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, George, too.
Any more questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much for the report. I think we'll all agree that it's a very exciting project, so we wish you good luck with it, and we're sure that many residents will have lots of years, you know, getting really good care, support, and, you know, hopefully this will be a scheme that we can spread out across Sheffield when we've looked carefully at how it works. We do have one recommendation, which is in the report. It's on page 74. Are members all happy to agree that recommendation, please? Anyone not? Brilliant. Thank you both for your time this afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you. So we now slip back in the agenda to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the electric vehicle car lease salary sacrifice scheme, which is pages 23 to 32 in our agenda. And we'll just wait a few moments for the officers who are presenting to arrive in the chamber. Good afternoon, Mark. I understand you're here today to present item 8 on the agenda, which is the electric vehicle car lease salary sacrifice scheme. Thank you for coming this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here to introduce this relatively short report seeking your approval to introduce a salary sacrifice scheme for our council employees. This scheme would allow council employees access on a leasing basis to electric-only vehicles, a range of vehicles that they could access through the scheme provider, and pay for through their salary. The scheme has benefits for the employee. Not only are they accessing an electric vehicle, but actually they may well make savings on their gross pay, national insurance contributions, pension contributions if they choose to do so, as well as having benefits for the council, because we would also make some savings on employer-related costs. I think the scheme shouldn't be seen in isolation. I'd like to think it's part of the overall package of benefits that we aim to make available for our council employees. And a number of those are now focused on actually helping staff to think about the way that they travel and to use, particularly to reduce their car usage. I'm happy to leave it there if that's okay, and answer any questions anybody's got.
Councillor Turpin, do you want to start us off, then Councillor Johnson?
Quite happy to let Councillor MacDonald go first, will you, if you want to?
I think mine was a comment, actually, so if you guys want to ask questions, I'll wait. We're being very polite to each other.
Mine's a question.
Okay, go first then.
Thanks for bringing this forward. And I just wanted to ask, so if you were to buy a new electric car, you can get a government grant to install a charger at home. Is that, will people still be able to do that with this scheme?
That is something that can be done separate to the scheme, so not directly through the scheme. It's also something that we will provide advice and guidance to council employees on, anybody who enters into the scheme, in terms of what options are available to them in terms of installing their own electric charging points at home. So it should be seen part of the overall package, but not done directly through the provider of the car scheme, if that makes sense.
Councillor Johnson?
Thanks, yeah. Not a question, just a comment. I mean, just say, pleased to see this coming forward. It helps to switch over from petrol and diesel to electric vehicles for those who need it. It's not a criticism, because I think we've addressed it in previous discussions about the need to not fall into the trap of think that electric cars are the answer to everything. They still lead to congestion, they still lead to pollution through particulate matter, and there are schemes that already provided through the council's HR service about supporting people with loans and I think purchases of e-bikes, and the information and support that's given for people actually to get about by walking, public transport and all those schemes. I just want to, I suppose, reassurance that all those options are going to be promoted to our staff as much as this, because actually if we can get people out of vehicles altogether, that's always a help where people can do that. But thanks. But just generally, yeah, glad to see this scheme coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, and I agree. I think we do, individually, we have a range of different initiatives which would support council staff to think about how they commute, how they travel outside work, actually. I think what the introduction of this scheme provides us with an opportunity to do is actually to pull all of those individual strands together. We'd like to do some work to actually promote all of those different initiatives alongside one another, to think about how we can actually set out that range of options so that staff can make some choices. This is, for me, this is all what this is all this is about. This is about actually giving people choices. Some of those choices will have benefits for them because, as you've highlighted, the salary sacrifice cycle scheme that we also operate now. We've raised the spend limits on that so that if an individual wanted to get an electric bike, that can be done as well. So yeah, I think there's a good opportunity to promote that whole range of different offer to staff, and we'll do that at the point at which we launch this new initiative.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you for the report. And, you know, obviously we've talked about the travel options and so on, but I'd just like to comment on this as a really significant thing in terms of staff retention and attracting staff, because in several areas there are quite a lot of staff shortages. So we need to actually, and we can't keep escalating the salaries and the financial offer, but this is a really good indication of a whole package which would make Sheffield a very attractive employer So I welcome that from that perspective as well. And it is a good opportunity for us actually to put all our offer together and use it to promote Sheffield as a good employer alongside the fair wages that we pay as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Absolutely agree, Councillor MacDonald. It's a really good scheme. It does build up the offer that we have for employees in the council, and hopefully, it deals with the very important environmental issue. So, any more questions? That was very that was very easy, Mark. We have 3 recommendations on page 24 of your pack. Are we happy to agree all of those, please? Anyone not? No? All approved? Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Mark, and for the report. Item 9 on the agenda is the Sheffield Local Development Scheme and member engagement on the Sheffield Local Plan Spatial Options, which is at pages 33 to 60 in the pack, and we'll just wait for the officers to enter the chamber. Good afternoon. We have with us Michael Johnson and Simon Vincent, who are going to present to us this afternoon about the Sheffield Spatial Options Plan. Thank you for attending this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief introduction for the report. There's two principal purposes. The first one is to propose an extension to the timetable to deliver the local plan, which is known as the Local Development Scheme. And the second one is to agree a member engagement strategy moving forward to cover the sort of key issues with the local plan as we aim to deliver it within the revised timetable if that's approved today. Just to touch on those two things briefly. So the proposal that's in front of members today is to extend the timetable from 2023 to 2024. It's worth just pointing out that whilst obviously 2024 feels like some time away, the proposal is for us as a City Council to deliver a draft plan for public consultation towards the end of next summer. A large part of the back end of the process, as it was with the previous sort of local development scheme, is anticipated to be around about 20 months, where we submit a draft plan after public consultation to the government and the inspection takes place, and that is a really long period, which is why it feels like a significant period of time. But as I say, worth repeating that the proposal in front of members today is for us to have a draft plan ready for public consultation next summer. Just touching briefly on the delay, there are a couple of key elements to that, but the main one sort of to pick up, and I'm sure we will potentially discuss it a little bit further through the debate, is the 35% uplift that the government put on Sheffield in December in 2020. Before that uplift was put in place, Sheffield had a target through what's known as the standard methodology, which is the government's way to calculate housing need within different areas across the country. Sheffield's target at that point was 40,000 homes, and we'd gone to the people of Sheffield with our Regulation 18, as it's known technically, which is the issues and options document. As part of that issues and options document, the proposal was to look at accommodating our housing need, which was 40,000 at that time, through a range of different options. But one of the options that we felt was deliverable was to do that without going into the green belt, if that was what the general public felt that they wanted to do, and members supported that. So there was an option on the table that identified 40,000 within our central area and within our urban area. Now that would have touched urban green space to an extent. The uplift in December 2020 effectively was given to the 20 largest urban conurbations across the country. And it's a 35% uplift, and it was aimed at delivering the 300,000 homes that were targeted in the Conservative manifesto. The consequence for Sheffield was that it moved our target from 40,000 to 53,000 approximately, which was a significant change. And it fundamentally meant that we needed to review our strategy in terms of the spatial approach to our development moving forward. The complication around that in December was there was no evidence base provided with it, really. So the next thing that we needed to do, and not just Sheffield, but the other conurbations that were given the uplift, was to produce an evidence base to see whether actually, from a trends point of view, jobs, growth, migration, etc., that was something that you could sustain, because there are consequences if you can't. Now, that evidence base wasn't ready for us to start to consider until the early summer, at which point, obviously, we had local elections and a different administration and a different sort of approach to doing things, not least the sort of moving towards a committee system. So all those things taken together has meant that we're in a position now where we've had to spend some time considering the 35% uplift and reviewing the evidence base, and then come to you as members and look at how we consider the evidence base, consider the 35% moving forward, and make decisions for the people of Sheffield as a result of that. So there are other elements to the delay, but that's the key one, and the one that's sort of worth touching on at this point. The other aspect of the report is to seek agreement to a cross-party sort of member engagement process moving forward for key decisions associated with the local plan. And there's people in the room who we've already spoken about how that would work around spatial options, and that's summarised within the report, and its use of transitional committees, this executive, full council moving forward, and then the creation of a cross-party working group that springs out of the transitional committee to deal with other key issues in the local plan and have an advisory role moving forward. I guess the last thing to say really was we are confident that the steps put forward within the report around cross-party member engagement, etc., will give us the sort of political consensus that we need to make really good strides over the remainder of this year and the first half of next year to make sure that we can deliver on the timetable. Thank you, Chair.
Anything to add, Simon, or are we happy to leave it all to Michael? Brilliant. Any questions then, please, members? Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear that it's an additional 50,000 homes, and the timetable is January 2022 to work out the spatial plan. So are we literally having to work out where they're going to go in the next couple of months, or will it be sort of phased? We'll work out areas between now and 2038 where things are going to go, because obviously things change, and I'm not sure if we have to sort of submit some sort of fixed plan, or what flexibility is there. Thank you.
Chair, what we're seeking to do, I suppose the short answer is yes, the plan that we produce will show our broad principles in terms of where our development will go forward. So one thing that we're looking to do over the next couple of months is to start considering the evidence base and the housing target based on the 35% uplift, which essentially puts an extra 14,000 on Sheffield in terms of its target, and consider the response to that and where the homes should go based on the evidence that's in front of us. So it will be a plan that will identify Sheffield's spatial approach up to 2038. What is worth mentioning, though, is there will be reviews. So local plans have review periods after 5 years. So if you do put a strategy forward that actually isn't being delivered on, then there is an opportunity to review that and consider that further. Thank you, Chair.
So we really will also have to work out a transport plan as well, potentially, to go along with that, or unless we keep it really tight, then we're going to be having to look at all the implications of if we do go further out and what that means for transport, climate crisis, etc. That's going to be very complicated to do between now and December. I'm just wondering how much thought you've already put into this and whether you'll be able to share some plans with that working group already.
Yes, I mean, there's been quite a lot of work done already looking at the cumulative impact of different scenarios. We'll need to do some further work looking at the impact of growth right across the city and what impact that has on the transport network. And obviously, we know that increasing the population by potentially up to another 90,000 people is going to inevitably cause more congestion in the city unless we can provide alternative means of transport. And so part of the discussion we'll be having over the next couple of months will be to look at the best solutions in terms of where there are opportunities to use public transport, where there are opportunities to make better use of cycling and walking. We want to embed the concept of the 20-minute neighbourhood within the plan. So a lot of measures which are aimed at relieving the pressure on roads and getting more people into more sustainable modes of transport. And the spatial approach that we choose obviously has a big impact on the transport and travel solutions that are appropriate.
Just to say I'm greatly encouraged by that response. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to say, I mean, I don't envy your job. You've got an impossible task, really, haven't you? Because, and I think it's just, yeah, we've got this, you know, impossible duty to perform now as a council, which, you know, of course, falls on you to do. But it's just, yeah, we're in an insane political world, really. I mean, I think reading, you know, the advice that you're giving us, Michael, is that actually, if we built all these homes that the government says we have to build and will be penalised if we don't, we'd actually have thousands of homes standing empty across Sheffield because the market isn't going to support the need for them. And yeah, to me that just seems crazy. You mentioned there was no evidence base given by government, and we know that was because it was purely a political stunt. And it's probably easier for me to say that as an elected councillor than you. But I mean, it was because we know that there were objective measures working out where the country needs houses. They're in the areas of big growth down the southeast where there's massive housing shortage. And unsurprisingly, Tory MPs in the Shires kicked off a bit, and there was a complete U-turn to say, dump it in the bigger towns and cities where they generally don't have conservative administrations. So I mean, it's obviously a really blunt political point by government. And it seems to me that the impact of that is that no one's ever intending that these extra houses are going to be built, because that would be insane. And what the real impact of it is just to play into the hands of developers who have a complete new set of tools to say why they don't have to comply with the policies that we as elected members and through the officers have set in the remnants of the local plan that we have. So, sorry, I'm just soapboxing there because it does anger me actually how national government will just play with local authorities and, frankly, run rings around what the whole point about the planning system is meant to be, which is about balancing things up based on local knowledge and where local people have some say over their living environment. That's why I was saying I don't envy your job. I did wonder whether, because we know the local plan's been knocking around for several years, whether we had taken steps to get this into place earlier on, if we'd worked from the Issues and Options paper in 2015, when I think it was first consulted on rather than 2020, whether we'd be in a better place now. I don't know. I don't know if there's any point answering that question. But it is, of course, something of dismay where, for one reason or other, year after year we've delayed the local plan for a further year. There's no point in saying why I think that is. It has happened, and I've completely realised that it's impossible to rewind time to stick to the local development scheme that is currently in force in this council. So I fully appreciate where you're coming from. All the same, I think given the position that I've taken in the past, it will be impossible for me to support an active delay of a further year. So that's a very long-winded explanation as to why I'm intended to abstain on this, but so that there's a clear understanding that criticism of this completely arbitrary and unreasonable action by the government, coupled with delays that have taken place. So, but yeah, I fully appreciate what you're doing, and looking forward to the engagement on the substance of this once we get going. Thank you.
I don't really think there's any need to answer that. I think a lot of it
Oh.
was probably quite political, so it would be unfair for you to do so. I think from my own perspective, we are pushed into a corner where we have got to get on with this work. If we hadn't had the uplift, we wouldn't be sat here now asking for the delay. I think that's probably very fair to say, but unfortunately we have been asked to put in place an uplift. Councillor Teal mentioned transport. This is not just about transport, public transport. It's about the whole infrastructure network, jobs, how it reflects on the economy and everything. So there is a massive piece of work to get done, and I'd just like to thank members of the planning team for the work, the really hard work and commitment that you've been giving to doing the work so far. Nobody wants the delay. Certainly, as someone who's overseeing planning at the moment, I would really like us to have been able to get on with it, but it is events that are out of our control for the very political reasons that we heard from Councillor Johnson. So we are where we are. Has anyone got any further questions or comments, please? Councillor Teal.
Sorry. If it is true that we don't actually need to accommodate an additional 50,000 homes, and we do have flexibility in terms of the 5-yearly review, how concerned are you that we do designate all the areas that we would need for 50,000? I don't know what the consequences are if we don't highlight land that will accommodate those new homes. Can you say a bit about that, please?
Chair, I think for the here and now, it's to say that the next stage of this process is to engage with members cross-party around those exact issues and those questions. So we're not at a point, we've not reached a point where we've drawn conclusions, and it wouldn't be right for us as officers to do that without engaging with our members around the sort of the how we deal with the spatial dispersion of the numbers that we've been given, and indeed whether we should, depending on the harm versus benefit, and whether exceptional circumstances will exist in certain cases. So it's a bit of a loose answer to a question, only because that's really the next stage of the discussion that we need to have with our members to deal with those very issues.
And also, if the land is designated for housing, what impact will that have if someone comes along and wants to do something else with the land in the interim, if we're not sure that it's going to go ahead? Like, how much of an impediment might that be to other developments that we might want to consider?
An impediment in terms of not having an up-to-date local plan, or?
If we designate if we work out the land that we want to use for housing, and we designate it as housing, and that then actually ultimately it never gets used for housing, or we say it's for housing, but then 5 years later we decide, oh, actually, we don't need that. But in the interim, someone else could have come along saying they'd like to do something that would be beneficial to the city in that space, but we've already designated it for housing. Would we have the flexibility to change our decision about that, or will it be sort of off limits for any sort of development?
Chair, the presumption would be that it would be developed for housing. Each, as it's sort of a mantra in planning, each application on its merits, and if an application came forward to build something that wasn't housing on a site designated for housing, it would have to be considered. And depending on how strongly we wanted to support that, would depend on the conclusion we would reach. But the first principle really would be, if we're designating land for housing, to try to hit a set housing target, you would want to try to resist non-housing development on housing land moving forward. That would be your default position, but obviously you'd need to consider the specific case at the time.
Okay, thank you. We have got 5 recommendations for approval, which are on page 34 in our pack. Are we all happy to agree those? Abstain on all, yeah. Also. So we have 4 members for and 3 members abstaining. Okay, thank you. They all go ahead. Thank you both for the time and for the presentation this afternoon. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is the Sheffield Land and Property Plan, which is on pages 51 to 72 in our pack, and we'll just wait for the officer to enter the chamber who's presenting on this item. Hi, good afternoon, Tammy. I understand you're here today to present on the Sheffield Land and Property Plan. You're very welcome. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce the report, essentially, Sheffield City Council is a significant landowner in the city, and our land and property plan and our land and property has a significant role to play in shaping the city and the services that we deliver as a city council. The plan, our current asset management plan expired in 2020, so this plan replaces that current plan. And we've had unprecedented changes over the last 18 months with the current pandemic, and it's really affected how we manage our land and property and the services we deliver. And as a result, we need to respond to that as a city council. The plan provides a high-level framework to guide decision making. It sets out what we will use our estate for, and the benefits it can bring to our communities and to help deliver our services across the city. It will be underpinned by a suite of more detailed policies and work plans which set out how we will deliver what we're trying to achieve. In that respect, it doesn't provide all the detail on individual assets, their use, or what the council is seeking to do with them. And that detail will be brought forward at a later date for consideration. There are many competing demands on the use of our estate, and the plan is there to help provide a framework and guide decision making in the absence of these more detailed policies which will come through later. There is much we can do, but we have to operate within a current climate of financial constraint and the new ways in which we are working as a city. And the plan provides that framework, setting out the high-level ambitions that we want to achieve as a city council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions, please? Douglas has finally thought of something we can ask you. Councillor Johnson.
Well, thanks, Chair. It's not that I've finally thought of something. I just wanted to express the reservations that you've heard me express already. So I don't have anything new to add to it particularly. So just for the record, I'm just saying that I had reservations about the fact that actually the council's ownership of land and property to this extent in the city is incredibly important for the whole issues about climate change, flooding, transport, housing, and everything that is actually really important to all of us. So it's not just things in my portfolio. And yeah, I do have some concerns, and I realise that the officers have been working on this for a certain length of time. It's something that we've been briefed on only relatively recently, and I think what's important is that there is ongoing work. There is a list of policies attached at the back. To me, those possibly miss out policies that may yet be developed on the more spatial aspects of land management, climate change, flooding, resilience, food growing, etc. And there may be scope, and I hope there will be scope, to develop much more coherent policies in that respect. So I'm just expressing reservations there, and I will go as far as saying, fully support the work that the team is doing. It is good to see progress. There are so many opportunities out there that it's really important that they're not wasted. And I hope there'll be as much engagement with the team charged with looking after this, with so many other teams as we move to a much better period, I think, of collaborative working in the council. I think that's going to be key to it. So I'm just saying that to put that on the record there. I haven't put forward an amendment to the text list because I don't think that's needed. Again, I'm going to say that I'll abstain on the formal vote on this as a way of expressing those reservations. But in no way should that be taken as a criticism of the work that the team is actually doing. And certainly it is better to have a plan of some substance rather than no plan at all. So very much look forward to seeing those plans when they come forward. So I hope that's okay. Yeah, I said what I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. I was waiting to make my comment until everybody had asked their questions, but hey.
Would you like Councillor Teal? Would you like Councillor Teal?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the questions were finished.
Sorry.
Since Councillor Johnson went on to comments.
I just saw Councillor.
If Councillor Teal's got a question, I'll hold it.
Sorry, no, mine's a comment. I apologise. Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy, for all the work that I know that's taken place on the strategy. I'd just like to make a couple of comments about why it's really important that we need to make a decision about this today. Firstly, the financial impact on the council, and I think that's very clear in the document. And also, if I could draw your attention to the financial and commercial implications, which are on page 55, 5.2. So that's the first thing. And the second is about transparency. That it's really important that we have an overarching approach, and then we deliver we produce the policies as well, which means that we are fully and totally transparent every decision that we make about our estate and so on. And that's for the benefit of the local community. It's also good governance as well. So I think it's really important that we update the plan. And the third thing is that, just to reassure everybody, this is an overarching document, and that we're already planning significant engagement on individual aspects of it. So it's not intended to be the first and last step. It's actually the first step in a whole series of ongoing work that Tammy and her team, and together with others, will undertake. So I'd like to commend this report to you all.
Thank you. Councillor Teal.
Yeah, I'd like to commend the enormous amount of work that you've done as well, Tammy, because you had a huge task, and that became clear to us when we had a briefing about the situation that has been ongoing for several decades, where there's been a lot of work to be done that hasn't been done. And so I'm grateful that you stepped in and taken this massive job on. I think it needed to be done. But I just want to express my deep concern that things ever got to this stage. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. We can't change it now, and we're going to review it, and that's a positive thing. Yeah, I'm also intending to abstain on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, and thank you, Tammy, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on this over the past 18 months, which I will be supporting this because we do need to move forward as an administration, and I'm really pleased that Councillor Teal's actually explained why, but I will be voting for it. I just want to say that it's, thank you, Councillor MacDonald, for bringing this and bringing it forward, and I think it actually opens up a lot of opportunity for our communities as well. So yeah, well done, Tammy. Thank you very, very much.
Councillor Turpin.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, Tammy, I think you're a great officer, a lovely person. I've got a lot of respect for you. And I absolutely see the value in having a land and property plan. It's a really important document. But first I was aware of its existence was 2 weeks ago, and like Councillor Dunn just said, she's been working on this for 18 months. I think we should have been included sooner. And take our role, I'll speak for myself, I'll take my role on the executive very seriously, and I've not come to just go with the flow or bow to peer pressure. And I honestly don't have the confidence to vote for this, so I will also be abstaining, and I hope that we'll be working in a much more cooperative manner in the future. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor Dunn.
Just for the record, Chair, that the first time I saw this document was probably June. I'd just like to make the point that we have the Green Party councillors have had significant opportunities to be briefed. How many, could I ask, Tammy, how many briefings that you've undertaken with Green colleagues?
There's been a couple over the last couple of weeks. We kind of started exploring briefings in September time.
Thank you. I just don't want people to think that others have been excluded, because that's not been the case. I don't know. If Councillor Dunn was involved in it, that's fine. I've only been involved since June. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, I just want to explain to the public that we weren't in a cooperative last year. We were a Labour administration, and part of that, like the Green Party know, that they do work. And then when it comes to a point, we bring that forward. And that is all that I was making on, is that it had been, I had been in part of a working group, which is what you do when you're part of an administration. It wasn't duplicitous, it wasn't secretive, it wasn't anything. It was just what an administration do when they are leading a city, and then it would have come forward as it is now. We're just part of a cooperative, and as Councillor MacDonald has just asked, Tammy, actually, as soon as this was formed into anything that we kind of thought, well, no, I'm not going to wrap myself in words, but when it was there, it was offered as a briefing, and I can't answer why, but we know that. Thank you.
Any more comments? We have 2 recommendations on the report, which are on page 52. Are we happy to approve them? I've got 3 abstentions and 4 for. Okay. Thank you for coming this afternoon, Tammy, and thank you for the piece of work. And you are the only officer that has had such a glowing report from Councillor Turpin today. You'll be pleased to know. Okay, we're moving to item 12 on the agenda, which is the medium-term financial analysis for 2022-2023 to 2025-26, which is at pages 83 to 102 in the agenda pack, and we'll just wait for the officer who is presenting. Good afternoon. We have Dave Phillips with us, who is going to be presenting the medium-term financial analysis. You're very welcome, Dave. Thank you for attending this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to see people in person after 18 months of not coming to council meetings in person. I'm here to take the cooperative executive through the medium-term financial analysis. I'm sure you all know this, but this is the analysis that sets out the financial position for the next 4 years, so 22-23 to 25-26. It's worth saying that it analyses our best estimate of the pressures that all our services face, and I'll come on to those in a bit. What we can do to divine what central government funding we might get, always a difficult task, and the mitigations that people have brought forward so far that have been identified to mitigate the pressures we've got. What it doesn't show is future ideas and mitigations that we will bring forward over the period and indeed during the rest of the course of this year to address the gap. So those of you that have sat on Co-op Exec Cabinet for some time will know that it normally presents a fairly challenging position at this stage, and it's no different again this year. What is different this year is that it reflects the impact of COVID on us, on demand and costs of all our services, and that is very significant. For example, we're having to put extra support in for families. We've got a lot of additional social care costs around looking after people safely in their homes, or costs of care homes, etc. We've seen reduced income for our leisure services and across a range of other things as well. All these pressures have resulted in a significant overspend for this year, and unless it's mitigated, that overspend will continue into next year and into medium-term financial analysis. As I've just said, the main pressure areas are adults and children social care and our leisure services, where the facilities are only just reopening. Obviously, there's a nervousness of going back into pools and things. There's a need to have more social distance, etc. So there's all those sort of things. There's pressures of different ways of working in social care, etc. So the table in the report shows a very significant budget gap of 121 million by 25-26, which is clearly far more than we can cope with an action. Being more positive than that, though, there are a range of things we're doing to address that gap. First of all, I mentioned earlier that we've got to work out where we think central government funding will go. And we've been relatively cautious in that, and we've assumed cash standstill central government funding. Everything we see suggests that the government is not going to give us a load more cash. What it is likely to do, what we think it may well do, is give us more ability to raise revenue from our own citizens through business rates, and particularly through increases in council tax and adult social care precept. Now, that gives us a range of challenges for local people in terms of affording that, and for you in terms of having to defend that on doorsteps. And we could have a long debate, which I sort of won't get into because it's political, on the relative fairness of relatively deprived northern authorities being thrown on their own resources against affluent southern authorities who've got much more resources to fall back on. But in strict financial terms, that should give us an ability to nibble into the gap, providing we're prepared to make those increases. Nationally, as ever, we continue to lobby central government to recognise our pressures, recognise our increases in funding, and we're expecting an announcement next week now on the next few years. Then it'll take time to work through detail, government wave their hands and give us big national figures, and then there's a process normally of a couple of months of those coming down into our local figures. That may or may not help. It's worth saying, and I know you know this, but members of the public may not, that the recent announcements on social care did a lot for individuals in terms of, not entirely when you get into the detail, but helping to reduce the fear of people having to sell their own homes to look after the care. And it announced a lot of additional funding for the health service. It didn't announce any extra funding for our baseline social care pressures. It announced bits for some training of our staff. It announced some support for the national insurance increases for our staff, not for any of our contractors, but it didn't do anything for our current problems in social care. So we haven't got anything from that yet, but we continue to push hard on that. There are voices that support us in Parliament, but it's an ongoing battle. Another area we obviously do is work hard with the NHS. Health and social care in particular is a system-wide thing, and we try and work very closely with them and use resources as best we can across that. And the final area that you'll be aware of as individual members, because officers will be talking to, and we'll talk to you a lot over the next month or two, is potential mitigations for the pressures that I've talked about in here. And quite a number of things have been brought forward already. There's quite a lot on the table. Those will have to go through a process of refining. They'll have to go through the political process to check that they're politically acceptable as well as implementable from an officer point of view. But the intention of all of that is to tackle this problem and bring it down to a manageable size, which we've successfully done over the past 12 years. We've faced this sort of problem all the time over the past 12 years because we've had 12 years, certainly 10 out of the last 12 years, we've had funding cuts from the government and 2 years of slightly better settlements. But, you know, overall, very significant cuts over the last 10 years in our central government funding. And we've managed to keep ourselves solvent. But it will, as ever, need a lot of hard work from officers and from all of you as councillors and as lead councillors to get there. So try not to be too pessimistic. As ever, there's a big challenge. We have got ways through it. I will stop at that point and invite any questions.
Thank you, Dave, and I think it's probably needs saying that, you know, none of us envy your job. It is a very difficult and tricky job, so thank you for what you do. Does anyone have any questions or comments, please? Councillor Linders Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you too, David. it's obviously a very sobering picture, this, and it's something we all need to, work very hard to make sure that ultimately beyond this organisation, the people of Sheffield can rely on their services for the future. I actually have quite a kind of technical question, actually. I think it's on 9 in the report where there's a couple of graphs that's for adults and children in social care that seek to compare us against nearest neighbours in terms of spend in the last sort of 5-6 years. Sounds a strange question, but can you kind of define the title of the graph? I was similar in children. There's one that starts ASC in brackets RA. I'm just trying to get my head around exactly what this graph is showing us in technical terms. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So apologies for the acronym. ASC is Adult Social Care, and RA is the revenue account, which is a return that we make to government. We make 2 returns to government every year on our overall position. One's known as the RA, the other one's known as revenue outturn. So the revenue account is effectively the budgeted return to government. So it's based on budget figures for each of those years. And that's part of a national return that's collated every year. We have to crunch the figures, and it goes into central government.
Thank you. Just going a bit further along that, it says pound age 80. Is this per head of adults? Is that what this is showing?
Yes, you're exactly right. It's the top one is pound for everybody aged 18 or over, and the bottom one is spend for everybody aged 0 to 17.
Thank you very much. Turn off.
Thank you. Dave, I just wondered what information you've had from other councils about the pressures that they are under. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is this just a Sheffield situation, or is this a much more general set of pressures on local government at the moment?
Thank you. You're right that there is a lot of pressure across the local government, so it's not just one for Sheffield. In particular, we've seen virtually every council saying they've got a lot of pressure on the children's social care. There's been a lot of pressure on families during COVID, and the bottom graph there shows that our children's spend has generally been below some of our nearest neighbours. We've been very good at trying to keep families together safely and prevent children going into care, and there's a continuum with children in care, whereas if we can keep them safely within the family unit, that's not only do you get better outcomes for them, but with my hard-headed financial hat on, it actually doesn't cost as much, whereas the more and more and more we have to intervene with them, generally the worse the outcomes and the more it costs. So we've been pretty successful on that side, and we need to continue driving on that prevention agenda. On adult social care, again, other councils are showing pressures, but we do seem to have probably a bit of a higher level of pressure than some of the ones we're seeing. We've asked around other core cities and we've looked at comparative information we've seen. So it really is a case of us having reacted well to support people during COVID and well to keep people out of care homes and look after them in their own home where we can do, but that can be very expensive. It can be a lot more actually than being in care homes, and there's now a need to get around to reassess some of those packages of care and work out whether we can get them safely back into care homes, whether we can do everything we can do to re-able them and enable them to live a bit more independently, etc. So it is definitely not just us, which I probably should have said during the presentation, my apologies. It is a national problem, and that's why there's national lobbying in this. And on our social care services face many of the same pressures the health service does, and we don't get any of the same national recognition normally, or any of the same national financial support. I think it's a relatively factual statement. So that then pushes things onto us and onto council tax and onto social care precepts and onto the sort of difficult decisions that people have to make to keep our budget in balance.
I have a second question. As one of our Lib Dem councillors has said, Sheffield is a well-managed council. So in a way, it's easy. Well, I would say that as well, but I think it probably has more impact coming from the opposition. But for me, this is the toughest budget that I've seen in the 12 years that I've been a councillor. So that's because I assume you would agree that we've had already over 10 years of austerity, and we know we've got this massive challenge on top of that, so there are very limited, there's very limited scope in this budget. I suppose what I wanted to ask you really was that everybody may well assume that oh, you always manage to balance the budget and you're just sort of crying wolf at this point. I just wondered if you'd have a comment about that for this particular year and the subsequent years based, covered in this medium-term financial analysis.
It's certainly true that, you know, there have had to be huge efforts over the past 12 years here and across local government to balance budgets. You know, they're not our figures, they're external figures, but we've had around £200 million worth of actual grant cuts. We've addressed a lot more in that in terms of pressures every year, but pressures can be upward pressures that bring down. But in terms of government funding, we've had a 43% cut in our government funding. It was up to 50% at one stage, down slightly to 43% now. So we have had to absorb huge challenges over the past 12 years, which we've with a lot of hard work managed to do. And as part of that, you know, we've picked everything that you might call low-hanging fruit. We've done everything that and a lot of that low-hanging fruit wasn't easy decisions to take. So there were things like shutting Don Valley, which was a very contentious decision, moving libraries over to communities, etc. So there's been a lot of tough decisions we've had to make, and those sort of decisions just get harder every year because they're just harder and harder to see what you continue to do to manage money out. So we're certainly not crying wolf. You know, positive, optimistic that we will get through this and we will continue, but it will not be easy, and it will involve decisions that nobody really wants to make on services that nobody really wants to cut, because that's not why we're sitting here. And it will involve people out there saying, you know, we're being asked to pay more council tax, and we're seeing service cuts, which will be difficult. And the chair very kindly said she didn't envy me my job, but I actually don't envy you your jobs, having to do all these things. I think it's an incredibly difficult job to do and to explain to the public, but sadly that is the position we're in.
I'd just like to thank Dave and his team for all the work that goes into this report as well. And thank you.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, and thank you, David, and thank you for all the support you've given my area over what has been the most challenging time that I've ever had as a councillor. And I would just like to say to the people that are watching, the rest of the people here, that I have written to government and I've been well supported by officers. I've challenged on every area of the portfolio as where the pressures are and that they're not being met. It's been a massive learning curve for me, and I don't think lots of members of the public understand that whether you have 50 children a week that need support or 5,000, the money doesn't change. That you have to find it out of the pot that is given to you from central government, and that is quite shocking. It is really, really shocking. And all the early intervention that we know has worked, which is why our children in care numbers are some of the lowest out of any core city, in fact anywhere in the country, is down to non-statutory, which means that the government will say you don't have to deliver it. And that is what we have done extremely well, is that we know that early intervention works. We know it means, as I said in my speech at full council, that a child is not hiding under a table because they're frightened of being beaten or being sexually abused, because we can get in there earlier. And I have been working with my colleagues across Barnsley, Rotherham and Doncaster. We have written together because these are pressures that are faced, you know, and it is hitting the north worse, and it is political. It's because of 10 years of austerity, and after nearly 2 years in a pandemic, we have had a sharp rise and increase, 2.7 million in demand, because things have been suppressed, because families have not been able to. And instead of it being early intervention, it's gone high cost, because that is what we need to do. So this is not mismanagement. It's been done amazingly well. But I just wanted to thank you and just add, behind a budget line, there's a human context, and that's why all of us in this chamber are here, because we want to make lives better. And I just want to reassure that I'm doing everything I can to throw that back, but it isn't going to be easy. And thank you, Councillor MacDonald, for all your support.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dunn. Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Turpin.
Thanks very much. And again, thanks, Dave, for all the work on this, and also being able to present it in as clear a fashion as you possibly can. And actually, I think Councillor Dunn made a really good point. You know, the fact is, you're one of the few people in the city who actually understand the figures here. They're not easily understood by the vast majority of people, you know, including us. And the example he made is that a lot of this is counterintuitive. It just doesn't make ordinary sense, but actually that is what, you know, we have to grapple with when making decisions there. I won't go soapboxing on about but the theme of what I was speaking about before when I was on a bit of a rant about the government was, for your benefit, Dave, it was about the fact that the government will make, you know, big political moves and gestures such as, hey, look, money for social care, but actually it's just running rings around officers who are having to do the actual work here, and for families who desperately need that social care when it's not coming to them. I won't say all that again. But yeah, just like this. I was just wondering if you would give some advice on the areas of uncertainty. I mean, obviously, this whole analysis will be based on a number of assumptions, and I just wonder if you could tell us where you think are the areas where there's the greatest level of uncertainty in the basic planning assumptions for where we are at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think probably the greatest area of uncertainty is central government funding. We've, as a sector, been asking for certainty over our funding levels for a long time now. The government did respond in 2016 by giving a sort of 4-year settlement for local government. It wasn't a good settlement in terms of the numbers, but it gave us 4 years worth of planning certainty, which was obviously very useful. The intention was that they would continue to roll that forward through future comprehensive spending reviews. However, for various reasons that hadn't happened. They promised another one from 2020 onwards. Then there was an election, so they deferred it for a year. Then there was COVID, so they deferred it again. I believe they're going to come up with 3-year figures fairly shortly. But obviously this has had to be written in advance of that. So that might change quite a bit within here. If we're very, very lucky and we get a big pile of money from the government, obviously it would change it quite significantly. Not sure that's going to happen, but there is that uncertainty. And then, you know, a number of the other numbers, obviously we're trying to predict future demand, we're trying to, and councillors have already talked about the demand-led level of a number of services, and the fact that we can't just not protect children, we can't just not look after older people. So if there are more people that need looking after, we have to respond to that. So that's and we can make an assumption on that, but we're not necessarily absolutely right. We can't know quite how quickly things like leisure income and car parking income will come back again. There's an assumption, but there's a range around some of those. We give some ranges in here, but they are just to give a bit of an indication, really, where things could be. And finally, we haven't so far seen the level of recession that we were all worried about 12 months ago, and I would have said was huge uncertainty 12 months ago. There's still a danger that we'll go into another round of COVID, or we'll go to another round of lockdown, or we'll start seeing unemployment picking up or business failures, and that will impact on our council tax and business rate income as well. So there's a whole series of moving parts within here. All we can do is try and give you some indication of where the number is, and then refresh it at regular intervals. Thank you, that's very helpful.
And you've had your one soapbox today, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Tipp.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a short comment. Thanks for doing the report, David, and it's just frightening. And we've all of us in the room have had our meetings with you and various other people about it, and there's just very little left to cut. You know, it has been cut already, and it's just if this is levelling up, then this is levelling. Like you would level a building. This is not levelling up, and perhaps they need a new spirit level. It's just a hateful government cares more about stopping peasant immigrants coming across the channel than it does about people dying and dying in the streets. It is just such an awful place to be in right now, and there's not much more I can say. I wish this was one that we couldn't vote through, because it's just awful. Thanks. Sorry.
Any more questions or comments? No, okay, we have 5 recommendations for approval, which are on page 84. Are we all happy to agree those, please? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, David. Keep up the good work, and we appreciate you attending today. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for your time.
Item 13 is the capital approvals for the 5th month of the year, which is pages 103 to 132 in our agenda pack. And we will just wait for the officer to come into the chamber. Good afternoon. We have Damien Watkinson with us to present the capital approvals. The lucky last, Damien. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, yeah. So there's just one recommendation overall, which is to approve the additions and variations to the capital programme and delegate any contracts coming from that to the Director of Finance and Commercial Services. Overall, it's a net increase to the programme of 4.1 million with some additions and some variations. Again, I'll not go through every single one, but just bring out the highlights. The works of the General Cemetery, funded largely by the National Heritage Lottery Fund, have been reprofiled because we've now appointed a contractor, so following delays around COVID. So there's some reprofiling of that at expenditure, but no increase on that at the moment. So that will be moving ahead. We've got Parkwood Springs mountain bike track, so it's £500,000 funded largely from British Cycling to increase the mountain biking tracks provision at that site to try and move it on as part of the master plan for that site. We have an increase of £4.5 million up to a total budget of £6.5 million for the delivery of new council housing at Gaunt Road. So that'll be delivering 30 new properties on quite a challenging site there. It was initially going to be delivered as part of a couple of other ones at Daresbury and Berners, but that was taken out because it needed more design, and as a result it's coming back now for the approval of its full budget to deliver those. There's also some reallocation of funding around the new council housing site. So there's various elements to that. There's general needs and older persons independent living. We were doing some of that work, some of the enabling work site-wide, but so there's just some movements between budgets on that because some of those works are now going to be absorbed into the individual schemes rather than done just as site-wide enabling. So really that's just adjustments around that budget. I think there is a small increase there, but not significant. The largest item on is 7.7 million for new IT infrastructure around housing and place IT systems. Lots of older IT systems in the area, particularly for council housing tenants to be able to engage with the authority. So this is looking at bringing something in that's going to be a better customer experience. It's going to be more integrated, and the hope is people will be able to self-serve more, and so they'll be able to focus. Officers will be able to focus their resources more on the people who need it rather than having to service everybody. So that's one of the key thrusts of that investment, hopefully, and it should save money in the longer term, being a more resilient system. And then just some other items really around some investment in the core estate and the schools estate around fire risk assessment, and some other investment in parks, resurfacing of paths to avoid trips, slips and falls, etc. But there are a few smaller items, but they're the key items that are in there this month. So if there's anything anybody wants to ask particularly on any of them.
Any questions? Do we all just love the list? It's obviously a benefit to, I was going to say there's a benefit to being last, but Councillor MacDonald.
Not a question, but again to thank Damien and all his colleagues And a lot of this stuff, obviously, these are just the numbers, but there's a lot of work goes on behind that to get to this point as well. And particularly, it's nice to see that, you know, the amount of grants and stuff like that, that we've got to do some really great things for our citizens. So it is lucky last, because we just had a depressing, the last item was just quite depressing, but it is good news, and thank you for the report and to your other colleagues who are involved in it.
Yeah, just, I mean, it is obviously, it's the services that develop those projects and bring them forward. All I'm doing is I'm lucky that I get to come here and just tell you what they are, rather than... Thanks very much.
Thank you, Damien. We just have the one recommendation then that is on page 106. I take it we're all happy to approve it. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Damien. Good to see you. And that concludes the meeting, colleagues. Thank you all for your attendance today, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.